Welcome to another episode of Unraveling Intellectual Property with Michael Stein. I have my esteemed guest, good friend, Dr. Aaron Tabor. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael.
And Dr. Tabor is very involved in the field of biotechnology and developing various products relating to the skin and other other things, I believe.
Yeah, other potential therapeutics.
Okay.
We're starting out with aesthetics and getting more serious as we go.
And today we're going to be talking about intellectual property issues and actually naming issues relating to the biotech field. And when I was just talking to you prior to starting the podcast, you mentioned a very interesting topic. And when I'm watching these ads on TV with these names, and people are, how the heck, I know my children, or where do these names come from? And I'm sure you have some insight into that. So why don't you provide some insight? How do these companies or how do you come up with a name for a product?
Yeah, so for when you're seeing these DTC, direct to consumer ads for drugs on television, you mentioned how complicated they are, right? You'd have to see it 1,000 times to get the name right. So they're always trying to associate some type of a song or a color with it or something. So you can tell your doctor that, that drug with the purple flowers, and the doctor, knows what it is. But the FDA makes you choose a drug name that cannot be confused with all of the other drugs on the market. So it's really for consumer protection, so you don't accidentally get prescribed, the wrong drug. Yeah, hopefully your physician, he or she, would catch this to begin with. But I see a lot of interesting parallels in the drug name with also getting intellectual property around your company name, particularly as a biotech. You see all of these Greek names, Latin names, Greek god and goddesses names, and a lot of these are really hard to spell and to pick up and to remember, and it's a really crowded intellectual property space. So, you and I are going through a little bit of this exercise on naming one of our drug companies, and so it gets really interesting when you see not only the crowded field, but now you have to think about, okay, well, all the searching that goes on from potential investors, and then hopefully, if you're blessed to have your drug or drugs approved by the FDA, where are consumers searching for that? And a lot of that happens inside of apps now, particularly social media apps. So as you're thinking about a trademark for your name, you have to go and see, well, are those domains available that you want? There's, an endless number of extensions now. Are the main social media URLs available, right? Like, so for example, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and others where serious business people may be looking to invest or trying to find out information about your drug. And then also something I've noticed is these digital assistants, they have a horrific time if you speak into your phone, please pull up or please search for whatever that complicated name is. It'll come up with something completely dumbed down. So I have been enlightened, so to speak, to try to think this full spectrum through before we get into renaming a company or choosing a new like a name for a new company.
And I assume the name has to be distinct throughout all of the medicine, right? Not just your particular field.
Yeah, that's correct. That's my current understanding, with our current development phase, it's not something we have to worry about yet. But when you do get to a certain phase, the FDA will allow you to engage and get assigned a name for your drug, and then you may or may not be able to file for a trademark. It has to meet certain standards of how far along you are in your human trials, maybe preclinical trials, but how far along you are in your clinical trials if you're able to file a trademark early for that. And that way you can start blocking off those social media properties.
And anyone who goes to the doctor, you have the brand name, and then you've got the medicinal name or whatever you call it.
Yeah,
And
your chemical name and then your brand name,
so I
which is
assume you have to go through the process for both of these things, correct?
if you think the ones you currently see on TV are, pretty crazy, the ones that these new cellular and gene therapies, they're about an order of magnitude more difficult. It's really hard to get your head around. You have to write it down and really read it and study it on how to even pronounce it. So it's going to get ever increasingly complex, the chemical names as we seeing these wonderful new gene and cellular therapies start to get approved. So it'll
Do,
get more complex.
do these names have to have some relationship to what the product is?
I have looked at a few of the early approved cellular and gene therapies, and there's some commonalities in certain parts of it, but I can't uh, decipher the pattern yet. I don't know if the company that creates the drug has a little bit of a leeway for the prefix part, but usually the suffix part is what's being locked in by the FDA. So a doctor administering the drug, clearly knows, or say a pharmacist dispensing it to a doctor to be administered, they clearly know that it's a genetic therapy or
Okay,
a
got it.
viral genetic therapy or a cellular therapy.
And in this process, are you doing any market studies? Are you just asking friends, how does this sound? Or the names that no one can remember them anyway, and you don't care? What considerations when you're coming up with them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, for a company name, that's easy because if you have millions, if you have millions of dollars, there's a company out there that will take those millions of dollars to come up with a company name and a logo for you. Um, we haven't done that because one, we don't have for three reasons, we haven't done that. We don't have the money to do it, and the other two reasons do not matter at all. So with us, we typically will just brainstorm around a small group of family and friends for a new company name. Um, and then usually my call or next email is to you. With the drugs, that's where you have to get um, government agencies have to get involved in what your actual drug name is.
I remember it was a couple of years ago, one of my clients had to do with sinus, decongestant, and they sent me a list of 20 names or something, and to do some initial clearance, but they had three or four that they wanted to focus on. And,
Yeah.
because if you just hone in on one and that doesn't work, then okay, let's start from the beginning. Or generally, from my experience, and maybe your experience is a little different, these companies have a series of possibilities with some of their favorites.
Yeah. Were you successful in getting one of the three to four that they preferred? Was
We
it
were, we
available or
were.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
when you get into certain fields, you kind of want something relating to whether it's the actual chemical or if it's the impact or something psychological relating to that. And
yes.
or you tend to get a more popularity in one area of the naming, which of course makes it harder to get through the trademark office, but we were
Mhm.
successful.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about, the more popular the name is, it's likely to be already used or just already, too much competition in the area for it, too much confusion phonetically or, spelling wise. I, in the company name we're trying to get right now, we're trying to find something that you can hear it one time and remember it on that very first time, which is extremely difficult for anything. So we're trying to avoid, these really complex names that our biotech companies are notorious for to constructing. And so it's a real difficult battle. I usually start by doing my own search engine searches and then I'll go and search on the popular social media platforms, and then take a quick peek over at the self-service USPTO trademark database, and then I report upline to you.
All right. You're one of my most savvy clients. So it's a pleasure working with you in that regard.
Yeah, it's
But
been a real pleasure.
I mean,
We've been successful at almost everything. Sometimes we pick and choose our battles, but
yeah, I think we've gotten some pretty challenging names to get through. I mean,
yeah,
people tend to want something that's descriptive, but as we were just discussing, descriptive, there's more of those out there, and in a way, they're less distinctive.
that's right.
That I kind of use as an example the name Exxon.
Hmm.
Exxon doesn't mean anything, but you can remember it, right? Everyone
That's
knows
right.
for gas, EXXON, which doesn't mean anything. And they went through a whole process because they needed that worldwide. And I think they had some issues with ESSO back when it was that. And
Hmm.
they did a worldwide search.
Yeah, that's interesting because a lot of drugs that have, of course, the complicated name and then the brand name, they don't get to use the USA brand name in other countries. So it's extremely difficult to find something that sounds normal, that that's very easy to remember, that you could have global rights to. It's just very super difficult.
Right. So let's end part one, we'll call it, of intellectual property relating to biotech. And we'll be having you back for part two.
All right, look
My
forward to it.
audience, thank you for tuning in and look forward to seeing you on the next episode or part two of Unraveling Intellectual Property with Michael Stein.